Et bonjour à tous, ici Peanuts. Vous m'entendez un petit peu parler en français, mais je vais switch sur l'anglais parce qu'aujourd'hui j'ai un invité de marque qui est irlandais. Donc je vais pas pouvoir parler avec l'accent irlandais vu que j'ai déjà du mal avec l'accent anglais. Mais j'accueille aujourd'hui ici Dara O'Kearny. So hi Dara, how are you?
It's a pleasure to be here, and well done on the pronunciation of my name. Most people in poker get it wrong.
So you're Irish, and we can say that you are the best satellite poker player in the world. We just finished the translation of Kill Till, so here is the book. And of course, like the name says it all, it's a really deep book about understanding the poker satellite strategy. And I read it. That's a huge book. I didn't know that satellite strategy was so deep because, like many players, I make the mistake thinking that it's just another kind of tournament, but the differences are really, really huge. So what's really cool in the book is that you have exact, perfect ranges and key concepts. You can apply it directly on the tables. And like if you read it like only 1 hour, your poker level on satellites will go like this. I have to say you won like about 4 millions in satellites, 1 millions alive and 3 millions online. Yeah. So while I was preparing the interview and I saw your bio and everything, I was really in shock because, no offense of course, but you started poker kind of old.
Very old, yeah. I was 42 years old when I started playing poker. I had played a little bit as a child, but it was draw poker, 5-card draw.
Yeah.
So that was very, very, and you know, it was so long ago, it was barely in my mind. But yeah, I started playing when I was 42 and I got very obsessed with the game very quickly. I was professional within 1 year and I've been professional for the last 12 years.
First of all, you were really in really high competition into chess, backgammon, bridge, and ultra running, which is a kind of marathon, but with much larger distances. That's right?
That's correct, yeah. I've always been very, very competitive. It started when I was a small child because I have a younger brother, and
Yeah.
the main thing I want to do is I want to be better at my younger brother in every game. So we play checkers, and then we would, after a while, we would know who was the better player, and then we would stop and try another game. So we went through about 100 different games as children, including chess as well. I actually got pretty good at chess, and I got to the stage where I was able to win some small competitions in Ireland, and I was very obsessed with chess as a teenager. But I quickly realized I was never going to be Grandmaster, then I kind of lost interest. I knew I was as good as I got. Next thing I took up was bridge, and that was actually with my brother. He was my partner when we played bridge. We played really high level. We were one of the best in Ireland again. Then he stopped playing because he moved away, and I started playing backgammon. Then in my early 30s, I decided I wanted to try running. I didn't really think running was something I was going to be good at because I wasn't athletic when I was young. But I actually found I was a reasonably good long distance runner. So I ran marathons for 7 or 8 years. Again, not quite top class, but the level just below that. And then towards the end of my career, when I was 39, 40, I decided to run even the longer stuff, ultra running as it's called. An ultra marathon is any distance which is longer than a normal marathon. So that can be 60 kilometers, it can be 100 kilometers, it can be
100 kilometers, my God.
20. It can be 24 hours.
So you are running 24 hours straight.
Yeah. The race starts, everybody starts running, and you just run for 24 hours, and then they say, okay, the 24 hours are up, stop where you are, and we'll measure how far you've run.
Okay. Oh my God, the mental aspect of that, I can't imagine, because you have to go through pain, through boredom, through doubt.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive because like even the top people, when they train, they never really ever run longer than 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
When you run a marathon, you run almost as long as a marathon when you're training. When you run shorter distances, you run those distances, so you know what it's like. But you never really know what a 24-hour race is like until the race is actually there.
Yeah.
I talked to my friend David that I do the Chip Race podcast with once, and he said, what's the hardest thing about 24-hour race? And I said, well, the hardest thing is after about 6 hours, because you're already really, really tired, but you know there's another 18 hours still to come. So
you are only 1/4 of the whole
exactly,
race.
yeah.
Oh my God,
you're
25%.
You're already as tired as you can possibly be.
God.
Okay. And it's just a mental thing. The first time I ran 24 hours was for the Irish team in the World Championships, because they had 3 really good runners, but you needed 4 for a team. And I had run 100 kilometers, but never 24 hours. So they said, okay, well, you're the only other person in Ireland who might be able to run 24 hours. So I talked to the other guys and I asked them, like, this just seems really difficult. What do I do? And I remember Marty, the one of the best guys in Ireland, saying it's all mental. It's literally all mental. And the only thing you can do is you have to stay in the moment. You have to think about what you're doing right now. Think about running to the next corner. Think about, if you have to eat. Think about anything you have to think about right now. But don't think about the 24 hours, the 23 hours, the 22 hours, etc., that you still have to go.
Yeah, it's like when you are climbing a rock, don't look down. Just focus on the moment, because if you look down, you get paralyzed and you want to quit. Maybe we will make a podcast specifically on this because it's so interesting, but I will switch a bit on poker because people will ask questions about what the hell is that? We have 2 subjects, but it really interests me because I am a mental game coach and this is my kind of passion. So. But anyway, you told me, so like at 42 years old, you really get a grasp on poker, you love that, you play a lot, and you said that maybe in like 6-8 years I will go pro, but no, in fact that's fun. In only 1 year you win about $100,000, something like that.
Yeah, that was exactly my plan. The whole reason to even try poker was I was 42 years old. I knew I wouldn't be there. So I thought, okay, well, I need to find something else that will replace that. And I saw poker on TV here one night, the Irish Poker Open. And, there were people of all ages. There were older people, younger people, etc. So I thought, okay, well, that's obviously something you can do and you can play at a very high level. Even when you're old. So I'll take that up now. My brother was actually living with us at the time and he was already playing poker sort of semi-professionally. So I got him to teach me. So we spent an afternoon. He taught me the basics and I started playing online initially. Now, I basically was a winning player literally right from the start. He told me to play free rolls so that I wouldn't deposit any money while I was learning. So I played free rolls. On the second night I was playing online, I came second in a free roll with 10,000 players or something ridiculous. And I won like €160.
So you never made a deposit?
I never made a deposit, no. I never made a deposit in my life.
Great.
I said to him, okay, I have €160 now. What do I do with that? And he said, okay, I could see him thinking, and he said, "Okay, play really low stakes, limit cash." And the reason he suggested that was he thought, well, okay, he'll lose the money very slowly playing limit, 2 cents at a time. so I started playing limit. I was winning right from the start. So I think after about a month, I came back to him and said, "Okay, I have a few thousand online now, but I don't." It's rising pretty slowly. Maybe I should try something else. So then he taught me how to play tournaments, basically. And I started playing initially sit and goes, 9-man or 6-man sit and goes. And I did really, really well in those. So in my first year playing online, I made roughly €100,000.
Kind of a good start.
Very good start. I also decided to play live. So I went to the local casino here in Dublin, or the local card room, not a casino, I guess. And I played a tournament there. My very first tournament, I came second. So I thought, okay, poker is very easy. I went to my first big tournament in Ireland, the European Deep Stack, which actually for a few years afterwards Winamax sponsored, but it wasn't Winamax sponsored the year I played. I ended up winning that tournament for €47,000, I think. So now I thought poker was really easy. So I
have to stop you, but did you had really great understanding of the variance yes, we say this in
No,
English?
zero understanding.
Yeah, you was such a big winners.
I just thought, okay, I'm amazing at this game.
Yeah.
It's always going to be this easy. I do think relative to the time, I mean, this is 2007, 2008, when everybody was really terrible at poker. Yeah, so I think relative to the time, I was a good player. But there was definitely huge luck. And I've often thought that there must be a lot of players who run bad when they start playing poker and they think, okay, I'm just shit at poker, I should stop now, and they stop. But most of the players that I know who get to the top, pretty much all of us ran well at the start. And that encouraged us to keep going.
At least they didn't run bad, you know, because if you have a huge downswing the 6 or 3 first months, you just quit. You just think I'm bad or this game is rigged, you know. And
absolutely. Yeah, I think another reason why most people who start in poker start young is, you know, they don't have a family, they don't have financial commitments, etc.
You can lose money a bit, and that's not a huge big deal.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, but like when you have a family, I mean, my wife was very good, and she never really worried. I mean, it definitely helped on that front that I won from the start, so she thought it was easy as well. But yeah, I think if I'd been losing consistently at the start, it would have been very difficult.
Okay, so kind of a huge start, you love the game, you love what you're doing, and maybe it's fun, but you know, with the same cognitive level, the same brain capacities in chess, that's fine, but you cannot earn money, you cannot be grandmaster. At backgammon, same. At bridge, same. But when you try poker, we play real money, and you don't have to be top of the world to earn big. And if you go top of the world, you can earn a lot, like $4 million, $1 million and stuff. So that's what I am trying to teach to people is that, poker is really tough, but the brain capacities you need to earn like a lot of money, you cannot earn that much on other competitive games. Or if you want to earn that much, you have to be top level. And
that's a really good point. That's absolutely huge. I mean, I remember when I was ultra running, the first year I ran the World Championships, I was 34th, and somebody said to me, like, if you were the 34th best footballer in the world or the 34th best tennis player in the world, you would be making so much money. But unfortunately for you, you're the 34th best ultra runner in a sport which is not that interesting to the mass population. So for me, you know, I think I'm roughly the same level in poker that I was in chess and bridge and backgammon. But you say, you can be the 900th best poker player in the world or whatever the number is, and you can still make a lot of money from it.
Exactly. Anyway, just close the subject, but you have a lot of success first. That's great. And just what is for you the similarities between poker and the other competitive aspects, stuff you practice, activities like chess, backgammon, running?
I would say the biggest thing is just the fact that I had learned how to be competitive from a young age. That was sort of the start. I was always able to, everything I tried, I got reasonably good at, and I think that's just because I understand how to get good at things. I'm also very, very competitive. Now, I think when people think about being competitive, they often think it's just a matter of sort of like being, you know, very aggressive and very stubborn and wanting to win, etc. But actually, you can be too much on all that stuff too. It's really a matter of focus and concentration and being able to think about what's important in the moment, and to do that. And that's true in everything. When you're playing chess, you have to ignore all the stuff around. You have to ignore the fear that you're going to lose this game. You have to ignore the distractions of other players, etc., and just concentrate on your game. Same is true when you're playing backgammon or bridge. In running, it's even more so, because particularly when you're running the really long stuff, there's a lot of unpleasant things happening in your body when you're running for 24 hours. You feel very tired, injuries are possible, you have to keep eating, and then you start feeling sick because you're eating so much, etc. But you have to be able to put all that out of your mind and just think about the important thing, which is how to do the best. So I kind of took that into poker. So I've always had this ability to just, in poker, forget about the distractions, forget about tension, nervousness, what people are saying to me, and just focus on the game. And if something bad happens, rather than thinking, you know, this is terrible. Oh, poor me. I took this terrible bad beat. This always happens, blah, 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 which a lot of people do. And I think that completely self-sabotages people when they do that. You have to be able to say, okay, this happened. It's over now. I can think about it later. But for now, I just have to think about the next hand. And I have to think about what I have to do and my own performance. Another thing I think I took particularly from ultra running is that when you're running for 24 hours, you have to be able to deal with sort of boredom, doing the same thing over and over again under quite difficult circumstances. And poker is actually like that too, because when you're playing in a poker tournament, particularly live, you're sitting at the table. Most of the time you're just folding. It's pretty dull. But you have to keep doing the same thing over and over again. You can't allow that boredom to start affecting your play.
Yeah, and in any kind of learning process, you have to do that. In music, you have to play again and again and again. In basketball, you have to push the ball through the net again and again and again. The book is about that in a sense, because you have the same ranges again and again with little variations, and you learn key concepts because of these tiny nuances. And that's it. You have to love that. And if you love that and you are competitive, you will be kind of successful, I think.
Yeah, I agree completely. A lot of people think, oh, it's going to be exciting and different all the time. But the reality of it is it's really just learning how to play. And then once you've learned how to play, repeating the same formula over and over again and not getting bored with that, not diverging from strategy just because you're bored. I do sometimes see it's sometimes a problem for online players when they play live for the first time. Because they're used to playing online, you know, 8, 10, 12 tables. So they never get bored. Then they're suddenly sitting there and they're getting 22 hands an hour. And they start playing all sorts of hands that they would never play just because they're bored. You know, they say to me, okay, so I raised 8-5 suited in early position and then that something bad happens. And I'm like, would you ever do that online?
Online, yeah.
Would you ever look at 8-5 suited online and raise? And they're like, no, I wouldn't. But, you know, I hadn't played a hand for a long time. So people have excuses for changing. But the best thing in poker and in most things is to work out what the correct strategy is and to just keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Thank you for the answer. So when do you start to focus only on satellite strategy and to dig in deep and to really say, okay, I think there is something to learn, and maybe the level is bad and there is huge exploitative thing to make.
Yeah. So for the first year or so that I played online, I played limit cash, and then I moved into sit and goes, and I played sit and goes for a few years. I read Colin Moshman's book on sit and goes, which was the Bible for sit and go players, and I was really profitable. I made a lot of money in sit and goes for a few years, but then sit and goes, more and more people knew how to play them. The strategy was relatively straightforward. It's essentially a solved game. I started talking to my friends in poker about like what should I do? I don't think sit and goes are going to be profitable for too much longer. And one of my friends said you should try satellites because they are the softest tournaments online. And I said, like, why are they the softest tournaments? And he said, well, first of all, there's a lot of really bad live players playing them because they want to try and qualify for a tournament. And secondly, people just don't understand that the strategy is different from normal tournaments. So they make really big mistakes. And the biggest skill really is understanding ICM. And I understood ICM from sit and goes. So I thought, okay, I'll try those. I started playing satellites, and I was absolutely staggered how badly people play them. The types of errors people made were absolutely insane.
And still now, because the level has exploded since, but still now in satellites we see more huge mistakes that we don't see the same in like classic tournaments. Or
the amount of mistake in satellite is absolutely gigantic, because if you think about like a satellite, the difference between a satellite and a normal tournament is that if it's a satellite, say with 20 seats to a tournament, then first prize and 20th prize are the same.
It's the same.
So when you're on the bubble, the first thing is that you're essentially playing for first prize, because that's the biggest prize you can win out of the tournament. So if you make a mistake at this stage which costs you that prize, you've basically blown first place. And then people don't understand how the fact of 20 players being left, how much that changes the strategy. That now, like, if you have an average stack, let's say, and there are 20 players left and 19 are going to get a seat, because you're average, that means you have roughly a 95% chance of a seat if you just do nothing. So if you make a mistake which costs you the seat, you've lost 95% of the value of a seat. But, people will look down at a hand like kings or queens in that spot, and somebody shoves ahead of them and go, okay, well, I have queens, I have to call now. Not thinking, wait a minute, is queens really a 95% favorite? So, no, I mean, this is the thing about Hold'em. Like, the farthest ahead you can be in Hold'em, I think, is kings against king 2 offsuit. Yeah. And it's still only 95%. Yeah. So, like, in that situation, if you're more than 95% to win in a satellite and somebody goes all in for all of your chips, you have no hand that can call. Yeah. There's no hand that's a big enough favorite that it's correct to call. But people don't see that. They look down at kings, queens, aces, they call, they take a hit, and they lose, and they say, oh, that was a terrible bad beat. No, it wasn't a terrible bad beat. You should have folded your hand.
And I think maybe the conditioning through like 5 years, 10 years playing No Limit Hold'em, like in cash game or tournaments, they get aces, wow, it's the nuts. They get kings or queens or ace kings, this is good hands. Even if they understand the satellite strategy, they really struggle applying in real time the thing, because they get aces, they want to call, and they know they shouldn't, but you know what I mean? It's really hard to adapt like that.
It's really funny to me too, because sometimes people who don't understand this, when it's explained to them, they understand it, but they get really angry. Yeah. They're like, what's the point of even playing poker if I have to fold aces? I'm never folding aces. That's what cowards do.
So the ego is getting between this. Okay, great. So, by the way, guys, I will make a second video with Dara when we will actually analyze. He will actually analyze real hands, like in real situations, satellite, both live and online. So we will recreate the hands and etc. So it will not be in this interview, but in a second video. So just stay tuned and you will see that. According to you, why people are neglecting satellites that much? And so really often, tournament poker players, they want to get stacked, and they go see really rich poker players, successful poker players, say, just buy 50% of my buy-in, and it can be a great option, but it might not, because of the wave you have to carry on your shoulders, because you are not playing with your money. And in satellites, you can play huge live tournaments for like virtually nothing, for like it's cheap. So why aren't people more focused on this, on satellites too?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think it's probably changed a little bit over the years, but like when I started playing satellites and I told other players, other full-time players, that I was playing mostly satellites, there was a real snobbishness. It was like, oh, satellites, they're not real tournaments. And there was also a popular belief that you couldn't have that big an edge in a satellite. It was like, well, you can only win when you win a big tournament, you win first prize, and that's bigger than all the other prizes. But when you win a satellite, you win the same prize as 20 other people. Okay. People really didn't understand how big the edges were. I mean, I played the first couple of years I played satellites. My return on investment was 100%. Now, very, very good tournament players at the time online were making 20 to 30%, and they thought that was as high as it could go, and that if they played satellites, it would be even less. So it was a real shock to people when they started looking at my results that it was possible to beat satellites by that much. But it was because people played satellites so badly. Yeah. I think another reason why people neglect them is sometimes, they try them, but they don't really understand the strategy, and they play them really, really badly. And then they give up. A couple of years ago, Patrick Leonard, Pads, posted a graph of 20 of the best tournament players in the world, and he showed, just in satellites for the previous year, showing that they were actually losing in satellites. And people were saying, yeah, you see, satellites are not good. Even the best players in the world don't win. Okay. But I knew all of these players, and they were not good satellite players. They were brilliant normal tournament players, but they played satellites terribly, because they played the satellites exactly the way they played normal tournaments, which was really aggressive, try and build a big stack, push everybody around, and that's literally the worst thing you can do in a satellite.
Yeah, because in classic freeze-out tournaments, you play like that because you want to win big, like the top 3 places, but like you said, in satellite, you don't care, you just have to push through the bubble, and that's it. The first price or the 20 years price is the same, and it's really not the same game. It's not kind of a tournament, it's really different, the structure is different, so you have to adjust.
Yeah, okay. And even when people understand that, sometimes they just don't like it, because they don't like the feeling of having to be really careful and cautious and having to fold aces, maybe, if that's the right thing to do. It doesn't. It's not as exciting as being a really aggressive tournament player, trying all these really high-wire moves. So people who enjoy that come and play a satellite, and even if they know how to play the satellite, they still find it hard to adjust, and they just don't enjoy it as much.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, thanks. And so if you had to say what are the top 3 biggest difference between a satellite and a classic tournament? You said some already, but if you have to summarize 1, 2, 3 key concepts.
Yeah, okay. So I would say by far the most important concept is just understanding at the end, near the bubble, how tight you have to be calling off an all-in for all of your chips. And we go into this in detail in the book. In the example I said earlier where, there are 20 players left. Yeah, 20 players left, 19 seats. And you have an average stack. Because 95% of the field are going to win a seat and you have an average stack, you are 95% to win a seat. Mm-hmm. So if somebody pushes all in ahead of you, as I said, you need to be a 95% favorite to call. So therefore you can't call anything. Yeah. But, people will call aces or kings or queens or ace king, and these hands are never that far ahead. So that's the biggest mistake people make for sure, just calling off far too wide. I would say the next mistake is kind of related to that, in the sense that when you're playing in a normal tournament and you're relatively short stacked, we're supposed to split our range up. So when we have a super strong hand, we raise and we hope somebody shoves all in behind us and we can call, inducing as we call it in English. And when you have a good hand that's good enough to get all in, but you don't really want, you just push yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, in satellites, often there is no hand strong enough to raise call. You just push everything. So even if you get aces,
you don't want to be called in satellites. Basically.
You don't want to be called. Yeah, exactly. If it comes around to you on the button and you're a 90% favorite to win a seat, you push and you actually don't want to be called, as you said, because if they fold, you're now a 91 or a 92% chance. But if somebody who has more chips than you calls, now there's a 18 to 25% chance, depending on their hand, that you're actually going to bubble. So you don't want to be called. So you certainly don't want to just raise, have them shove, and then call yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's the second biggest mistake. People go on inducing too much. And then I would say probably the third mistake it is very similar, which is too much raise folding at the end. Yeah. People have a hand, it comes around to them, they have a decent hand like ace6 or ace7 on the button, so they raise. But then somebody pushes behind them and they're thinking, oh, now I can't call. Because, again, going back to mistake 2, because you should be pushing your entire range. Really good satellite players will understand that there's no hand you can raise call, so therefore you're just raise folding everything. Even good players do that. They go on, because they have fixed ranges in their head from normal tournaments, and they know, well, I always raise this hand in this seat.
But basically, they think they adjust for satellites, but they are not adjusting at all, because they are not really understanding deeply key concepts.
Yeah.
I read the book and I said, oh my God, the numbers and the tiny details that changes everything, the position on the blind. It's like, it's really close to final tables with ICM, but it's not the same. And you have many adjustments, and you have to understand that. And if you understand that, you can crush satellites tournament, because many players, good players, will make the mistakes, but amateurs, the mistakes will be like 10 times more big. That's it in a nutshell. I mean, money in poker comes from taking advantage of other people's mistakes. So when you're playing a format where nobody's making mistakes, then nobody's going to make very much money. So anytime I look at a format to play, and I've played different formats over my career, the main thing I'm always interested in is what kind of mistakes are people making who play this. Exactly, to exploit them.
Yeah, and how big are those mistakes? How costly are they?
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you take satellites and somebody makes a really bad call at the end, that can be an absolutely huge mistake, which is almost the value of the first prize. To take a different example, if somebody makes a bad call in a PKO, in a progressive knockout bounty tournament, that won't be as big a mistake, because they might win the bounty, and it's good to have a stack in a bounty tournament, etc. So the mistakes won't be as big, but the mistakes people make in satellites and continue to make are absolutely massive. And the number of players like you who said to me, really top class online players who said, I never really understood satellites. I played them a bit. I didn't do very well in them. I just thought it was a stupid format because I was playing them exactly the way I played normal tournaments. And then I read your book and I just couldn't believe how badly I'd been playing them and how different the strategy was. And recreational players who have read the book as well have said, like, I read the book, I started playing that way, and I immediately started crushing satellites because it's not widely understood how to play this correctly. Even very good players can get it wrong.
You know, it reminds me, because I was playing poker online at 2006. Maybe the first hand was 2005, so I really know how the skill level was. Like, in 15 years, it went like mad, you know? Now, when I think that c-betting, when you bluff, 3-bet bluff, stuff like that is totally basic. But at the time, 10 years before, it was like, wow, this is a revolution, and you could win such huge money with that. And it seems like it's the same now in satellites, you know? Yeah, people think they know, but they don't know. And maybe everything in this book will be totally basic in like 10, 15 years. But it's not now. So in poker, it's like that. When you understand key concepts, better and better than everybody, you can literally crush the game. Because of that, cash game and tournaments, it's really more difficult to win than 10 years before. But in satellites, you can have this edge, this huge edge you had before in 10 years ago in cash game or tournaments. Because people don't know that. They just don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I when I got really good at satellites and I was making money, I trained a few of my friends to play the strategy as well, so that they could do well, and they all crushed right from the start. But funnily enough, when I started writing this book, they all came to me and said, "Please don't write this book.
Don't publish it.
You don't want this. We make so much money from this because it's all secret information that only a few people know." But I said, like, well, first of all, not everybody's going to read the book.
It's like many people told that to Doyle Brunson at the time when he wrote the poker Bible super system.
Yeah, Doyle's book was the first poker book I ever read, and I remember him saying that in the book. And you know, it's funny, but then I felt exactly that when I told my friends I was writing this book.
Okay, great. So thanks a lot for these answers. And according to you, but because you say in the book, we don't expect you to know by heart every ranges you have to push. You have really deep analysis with really kind of precise mathematics and stuff like that. And you say it can be discouraging at first, you know. But what can you answer to people who will say, oh, no, it's not for me. I'm not kind of a math guy, blah, blah, blah. So I don't want to read this. How can we apply this on the table? How can you enhance this process, optimize this process of learning?
I talked about this a lot with Barry when we started writing the book, because we wanted the book not to be just aimed at professional players, not even just professional players, but mathematical based players, let's say. So most of the ranges in the book, they're there as examples. They're not there to be learned off by heart. And the reason why we did that way is, you mentioned earlier that, like, when you started playing in 2005, 2006, and now the level is so much higher. And I think that's true. Most people have a reasonably good understanding of sort of what the normal range in a situation is. Say when it's folded around to them on the button and they have 10 big blinds, they know roughly what the range that they're supposed to push with is. So we kind of accepted that people know those ranges as a starting point. But what we wanted to do was to show how much those ranges change because of the fact that it's a satellite. So we continually ran these spots and said, okay, if this would be a normal tournament, you're on the button, you have 10 big blinds, this would be your range. But now it's a satellite and you're actually on the bubble. How does that change things? Or now it's a satellite, you're 2 or 3 away from the bubble. How much does that change things? So really what we want people to kind of get is the sort of the big picture of, like, how the ranges change and why. So when they're sitting at the table, they might not know the exact range. They certainly won't be able to work out the exact range, but they'll know, okay, well, the bubble is near now, so I have to be much tighter. What type of hands do I not push? Okay, I know I'm not supposed to push small pairs anymore, or suited connectors, but suited aces are still fine, etc. So that was really a big part of the book. when it came to the structure, I had already done a course, a webinar on satellite strategy, and in that webinar, the structure I took was what do you do at the start of a satellite, what do you do in the middle, and what do you do at the end. When I started talking to Barry about the material, he said, this is not the way we should structure the book, because all of the really important stuff is the end. And a lot of people start reading a book and they never actually get to the end. So we need to put that stuff right at the start and put all of the focus on that. So the book is structured like that. We also put in a chapter at the start called, in English, I think it was Satellites in 30 Minutes. And that was literally just, what are the most important concepts that you can learn in 30 minutes? And I think if people, even if people just read that chapter and ignore the rest of the book, their satellite play will be much better. They'll be winning satellite players, because there's a couple of key concepts in satellites. And once you understand those concepts and apply them correctly, you're already better than 95% of the players playing satellites.
Exactly. Like at the time, if you understood in 2006 the importance of 3-betting light and 6-betting light, even if you don't really master it to the top level, if you understand a bit and apply a bit, it's such a huge gap in skill. And of course, everybody now knows it. I have a question for you. It's like, how can you say to someone who really want to play a really big tournament, maybe a high roller online, like 1,000 euros or something like that, and he doesn't have the bankroll, obviously, he has only 500 euros, 1,000 euros, and how can he select some kind of good satellites to play this? How much they should play it? Should they focus only on satellites? What do you have to say to a player like that?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and something professional players sometimes say to me is that, like, you shouldn't advise recreational players to play satellites, because even if they win the satellite, they're now in a really difficult tournament, which is not a good thing for them. But that's a very narrow way of looking at it. That's a way of looking at that. The only reason why people play poker is to make money. That's not the case. Most people play poker for other reasons. They want to have fun. They want to have the experience of playing a big tournament. They maybe want to play with big players. They want to go home and have stories to tell about. Exactly. They played this big tournament with these big players, and a hand maybe they played against one of them and won. That's really that's a huge part of the appeal of poker, I think, for most players, certainly most recreational players. Like, what I always say is that, like, if you're a good recreational tennis player, you can't turn up at Roland Garros or Wimbledon and say, I want to play in the French Open, or I want to play Wimbledon.
And if you play, you really have 0% of chance to win.
Yeah, you have absolutely no chance. The difference of poker is that anybody can play any tournament if they buy in or they satellite in, and everybody in the tournament has some chance of winning. I mean, Jamie Gold won the World Series main event, so literally anything can happen. So they're not. It's not the case that anybody's ever drawing dead. So, but just the experience of playing a tournament is really, really big thing for a lot of players. Whether it's a big live tournament, people want to play the World Series main event, or the Irish Open, or the Winamax Poker Open in Dublin, and even if they don't cash the tournament, they have a great experience from it. They get the enjoyment of playing a big tournament against big players. So that's very much the motivation. In terms of what satellites to play, I mean, there are a couple of guidelines that I always give. Okay. First of all, if you do read the book and you understand the correct strategy, then the more prizes there are in a satellite, the better. Because, first of all, the field would be bigger, so there'll probably be more weaker players. And by weaker, I don't mean just like bad players, but players who don't understand satellite strategy. So that gives you a better chance. But the second thing is just the size of the mistake that people will make will be much bigger. If you're playing a satellite that has only one prize, then people can't really make big ICM mistakes. If there's 2 prizes, they can make an ICM mistake, but it won't be that big. If there's 20 seats or 50 seats, they can make absolutely massive mistakes, and you'll profit from those. So try and find satellites where there are a lot of prizes and a lot of runners. And those are the ones that you'll have the biggest edge. The other big tip I always give is that if you're trying to qualify for a specific tournament, the later the satellite, the better. Because let's say there's, people are trying to qualify for the Winamax Poker Open, and Winamax start running satellites 3 or 4 months before. Well, a lot of the weaker recreational players aren't even thinking about qualifying for the tournament that far in advance. They don't start thinking until maybe a month or two away. So they're not playing the early satellites. The early satellites, people will win and then they've won their seat, so they stop playing the satellite. And that will tend to be the better players. So they're not playing anymore. And then as you get nearer and nearer to the event, more of those players are gone. More of the sort of recreational players who are just going to take one or two shots are coming in, and that's making the field softer. So usually the softest satellite for any tournament is literally the last satellite that's possible to play.
Yeah, and something you said in the book, two things actually I want to add. It's like you can just sell the price of your satellites and it's money. It's not always the case, but you can check that, and it's good because if you have a good return on investment, it can be direct money. And second, we didn't talk a lot about that. It's obvious, but people, they don't often think about it. When you play a really big tournament, live tournament, it could be 2,000 euros, 5,000 euros, and you qualified as a satellite, the money pressure is so low. You are so happy to play because you just invested a bit. But if you play with your money, or the money of your friends who because you made a stacking, it's not the same. You have a lot of pressures on your shoulders. But when you are playing a big tournament and you just qualified with a satellite, it's nearly a bonus. You know, you play, you are happy because you don't have so much to lose in your mind. So you said it's a really great experience. And so the book isn't at all designed to amateurs poker players, but if they want, they can learn a lot and have a lot of pleasure playing poker without so much downsides, which is losing a lot of money, of course. So that's it for me. But it surprised me a lot that it's kind of the only book in the world about satellite strategy. You have few more, but it's not at all the same level of analysis. Yeah,
there have been a few attempts to write satellite books, and to be honest, they're just not very good. In fact, in a lot of cases, they're wrong. If you follow the strategy, it wouldn't be good. Like when we started writing this book, people said, satellites are too much of a specialization. There's not enough people who play satellites or are interested in satellites for the book to sell well. And I mean, this is credit to Barry, my co-writer. Because he actually came to me and suggested that we write the book. And I had gone to training sites before and suggested that I make training videos on satellites, and they always gave me the same answer, which is not enough people are interested in satellites. But Barry said no. I mean, and the thing is, like, it's particularly recreational players who like satellites because, as you said, a recreational player wants to be able to play a big tournament, and this is the best way to get into it. So we're very happy to prove people wrong. The books has sold very well, and we basically proved that there was a market. And I think there are other people are going to probably write satellite books as a result. But we like to think we've written a satellite book to end all satellite books because we've gone into the strategy so precisely that there's not really any need. But
Jared, he wrote The Mental Game of Poker. Like, it's been maybe not 10 years, but 8 years easy. And it's the Bible of the mental. And I think this is the Bible on satellites, and that's it. So thank you, Dara. That's it for me. If you want to add anything.
Thanks for doing the translation, and hopefully I will see you at an event either here or in France.
I'm not sure this year because of the pandemic situation.
Yeah, this is not a good time.
Yeah, it's not a great timing. But anyway, thanks a lot again, and see you later, Dara.
Thank you.